This is Right on the Money with Tom Mosley, founder of Mosley Wealth Management.
Our mission at Mosley Wealth Management is to help people make sure they never run out of income the rest of their life and they pay as little as they're legally required to pay in taxes.
Since 1995, Tom Mosley and his team have been creating comprehensive, custom financial plans to help you preserve what you've earned and pursue what you've envisioned.
In retirement, a lot of people have built a great lump sum. We call that your lumber yard. But you need a blueprint to put that lumber yard into a plan that you can build a retirement house to live in.
What's on your mind this week, Southern California? The stock market, taxes, inflation, income, Social Security, how to ease into the life of your dreams? Let's discover conservative financial strategies starting right now. This is your Right on the Money Radio Hour with Tom Mosley.
And a very happy weekend to you. You are listening to Right on the Money with Tom Mosley. He is the founder and president of Mosley Wealth Management based right here in Southern California, and I'm your host, Kristin Oakley. Each week, we are committed to providing you with retirement planning solutions. We've got a great show for you this weekend. The title of today's show is Inflation Proofing Your Retirement: Strategies to Keep Your Money Working for You. Folks are definitely feeling the real financial challenge we're all facing with inflation, and it's really hit home for many retirees and for people who are about to retire within just the last couple years. I mean, it's just obvious to us that everything is getting more expensive, and that nest egg that you've worked so hard for seems to shrink as the cost of just your daily necessities keep rising. And it's not just about the higher prices, Tom. It's really this force that can put serious pressure on one's retirement income. And the problem is, if once you're retired, you might not have the same earning power to offset these rising costs. But here's some good news that we have for you this weekend. Understanding where inflation hits the hardest and then knowing how to counter it is actually possible. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to break down inflation's impact across different aspects of your retirement income. And then we're going to share actionable strategies to keep your money working hard for you to protect your financial future. But I know, Tom, you were sharing before the show, thinking back to the Jimmy Carter days. You know, there's a lot that goes into this history of inflation, isn't there?
I think it's not a scar, because I don't really get into the victimhood type mentality, but it's something that I'll carry with me all my life. My dad was born during the Depression, and he carried that Depression mindset, scarcity, fear that the banks would not honor everything that they had in the bank, because my grandfather lost a ton of money in the banks in the early 30s, late 20s. So I carry an inflation mindset, and I always have, because I bought my first house during the Jimmy Carter inflation days of the late 70s. And I remember going to church. I was the youth pastor at the Temple Baptist Church in Odessa, Texas at the time. And I went to church and was bragging about getting a 15.3% rate on my first home loan. So it's like, I mean, I was happy and people were upset with me. They thought I had pulled some kind of string, they didn't.
Because that was considered low during that time. Hard to believe.
It was. And some people were in the 16s and 17%. But you could also put money in the bank and get 12% in a CD at that time. So, along with the bad came the good. 12% didn't keep up with inflation because things were pretty rough right then. But let's bring it home to some of you who might not remember or might not have lived the Jimmy Carter days. If you are making the same amount of money right now in 2024 that you made in 2020, then if you have the exact same amount of dollars coming in, with the inflation that we've had, you had enough money in 2020 to last every day of the year, 365 days. But if you brought in that same amount of dollars, your money would have run out October 1st of this year. You would have been that far short, as it chops off so much of your spending power, your buying power, your living power. And when you're working and you still have a job, usually, not always, but sometimes wages keep up with inflation. You
Right.
get inflation, you get a raise, and so to make up for it. But when you're retired, I mean, it's the yo-yo plan. I say often, you're on your own, and you're
Hmm.
out there, and you're not getting a raise on some of the things we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about some of those things you might not be getting a raise on or enough of a raise on, and how to, and bigger than that, we're going to try to give you some hope in how do you overcome those things if you're in that situation.
Well, and this is why one of the things that really sets you and the team of Mosley Wealth Management apart is that when you build retirement blueprints for folks, first of all, you're starting from scratch, you're starting with a blank sheet of paper, but inflation is one of the pillars, if you will, on which you build this plan, meaning you factor it in. And it's so fascinating to me that a lot of financial planners out there don't even have the inflation conversation with their clients, yet it's crucial to success in retirement.
Yeah, it is. The CFP board. Everybody talks about CFP, Certified Financial Planner. That's a great designation. Some of my advisors have them. Several of my advisors are working toward that designation. Some have gone past that to the Chartered Financial Consultant. And that designation is great, that CFP. It's a board. They advertise, so they make you want to find a CFP. But you know, the side note is I've hired some CFPs who knew everything about finance but nothing about integrity. So you got to make
Mm.
sure you have a balance, and we try to make sure the very first foundational thing we have to have is integrity in anybody that works for us. And that's not saying that CFPs don't have it, but you can know everything in the world and not have integrity and be in trouble. But when I looked at the CFP board and they talk about the 5 pillars, and this is when I first started way back when, 30 years ago, the 5 pillars, and I'm looking at the 5 pillars and I'm saying, whoa, here, inflation is not built in there. I lived through those Jimmy Carter days. We've always had inflation as something. And, a lot of times I've been tempted, Kristen, to take it out and to not emphasize it as much. But I've always said inflation could raise its head. Inflation could raise its head. Guess what happened? 8.7% about 3 years ago. It raised its head. Actually, 2 years ago in 2022, it raised its head and we had to deal with it. So you better know about it. You better have that arrow there to shoot and kill that bear, because when inflation raises its head, you need to kill that bear because it can kill you.
Yes. And it's so important to understand specifically for retirees and those who are planning to retire in the near future, how inflation impacts your retiree income. And so that's what we're going to be diving into today. The reality is many retirees have more than one source of income during retirement. And so we're going to talk about these different sources, whether that's Social Security, pensions, investment income, savings. Maybe you are still working part-time. Not all of these sources of income are the same in terms of their vulnerability to inflation. So I guess let's start, Tom, with Social Security, and this will probably bleed over after the break as well. But let's talk about how Social Security specifically is impacted by inflation.
Well, the nice thing is every year, Social Security, as long as inflation raises its head, Social Security benefits are evaluated against different kinds of inflation calculations, and a cost of living, a COLA, COLA, they're added into it to Social Security every year. The adjustment
Right, that cost of living
that
adjustment. That's what the COLA stands
that
for, right?
that's exactly right, and that adjustment could be, in 2015, whoops, we got 0. We got nothing
Yeah,
because inflation was low, but then in 2022, inflation was high, so we got 8.7. So
percent. Yep.
percent, yeah,
Hmm.
so the nice thing of it is if you're holding off, here's one thing to calculate and to look at and to give you a little hope out there if you're not taking Social Security yet. Everybody gets that raise. And by that, I mean this: if you haven't taken Social Security yet, look at your Social Security. It goes up. There's a cost of living raise that goes up even if you haven't taken it. It doesn't just stay static. You get the 8% raise by just not taking it that year. In other words, if you're 62, you can start taking it. You'll take a big haircut. If you're 70,
Hmm.
you need to take it because it doesn't get any better than that. But during that time period, as long as you wait, it goes up 8% every year. Then you get an 8.7% cost of living raise, even if you're not taking it, and everybody gets it. So your Social
Yep.
Security could go up 16.7%. And we need to talk about that because there are some things that aren't impacted by that raise or they go up higher than that raise. So if you're sitting
Mm-hmm.
there and you're buying some things, we'll talk about those when we come back after the break. But in Social Security, we get a cost of living raise, that COLA, but it's not always enough to offset what real inflation is. And let's talk about the different kinds of inflation. There's inflation in general, there's your inflation, and then there's retiree inflation. And we'll get more specific when we come back. But here's the point for you, are you in retirement considering inflation? It's so dramatic if you don't realize that you're going to need more later on than you need now to buy the same stuff that you're buying now. Do you have a plan? We can help you put together a blueprint that considers inflation.
And it's never been easier for you to get your complimentary retirement blueprint. The team of Mosley Wealth Management would love to be able to help and serve you. All you need to do is pick up the phone and call this number, 888-930-5609. You'll be able to schedule that time to come into one of our offices scattered throughout Southern California, sit down with one of these all-star advisors, and be able to build your complimentary retirement blueprint from there. Stay with us. We have a lot more to cover on today's show of how to inflation-proof your retirement right after this.
Social Security is easy, right? The question is, should I take it now or later? Well, there are dozens of ways to take Social Security if you're single, and even more if you're married. This one-time decision can also affect how much you pay in taxes, how much you receive in lifetime payouts for you and possibly your spouse. You could increase your nest egg by tens of thousands of dollars, and unfortunately, the Social Security office is not allowed to give you comprehensive financial planning advice. You've paid into Social Security for decades. Don't you want to make sure you optimize your retirement income? Build your Social Security benefits into a retirement income plan with all of your assets. Get your own tailored, no-cost Social Security income strategy with Tom Mosley of Mosley Wealth Management. 888-930-5609. That's 888-930-5609.
Welcome back, Southern California. You're listening to Right on the Money with Tom Mosley, and I'm your host, Kristin Oakley. If you're just tuning in and joining us this weekend, we are talking about how to inflation-proof your retirement and sharing several strategies to keep your money working for you. We know that a lot of folks have been feeling the squeeze of inflation, especially over the last few years, and it doesn't affect everyone equally. It's definitely harder for retirees or those who are thinking about retiring because you're going to be most likely on a fixed income. But we have some good news for you today as we're going through different sources of income and helping understand the different vulnerabilities to inflation and what proactive steps you can be taking even now to safeguard yourself against this problem. Tom, I know before we dive back into these different sources of income, there was a study that came out that you wanted to share. Why don't you go ahead and share that with our listeners?
Well, Fidelity Investments, one of the big investment companies that helps grow money, and not so much planners, but they help grow money. They did a study and they found that at 3% inflation in general, 3%,
Mm-hmm.
if you
Which is the long-term historical rate, right?
right, if we go back 40 years before the last 4 years, we've got a flat 3% back to those Jimmy Carter days that we talked about earlier. If you just have a 3% inflation and you retire and you need $6,000 a month, now, hey, that's not uncommon here in Southern California where we do this show. If you need $6,000 a month at 3% inflation, in 20 years, that's $72,000 a year, $6,000 a month, will grow to $130,000 to buy the same amount of goods. And a lot of people pop up and they say, yeah, but if I retire at 65, at 85, I won't be spending as much money. Let me tell you what, you might not be spending as much money on the same things you're spending the money on now, travel,
Mm-hmm.
golf, those kind of things, but you might be spending the money on doctor bills and
Yep.
medicines and
Healthcare.
healthcare and other things. So at $6,000 a month, $72,000 a year, in 20 years, if you have a 20-year retirement, you're going to not need 72,000 like you do when you start out, but you're going to need 130,000 in 20 years. So if you ignore inflation or if you overlook inflation, or if you think it is a small cookie to crack, or a small little, key to open that is just really easy to unlock that inflation door, the buzzer's got to go off there. It's not that easy. You have to account for inflation. And what happens over a period of time is when people get impacted by inflation, their savings go down,
Mm-hmm.
or their credit cards go up,
Yeah.
or they take more money out of their retirement plans, and the money that they were planning on living on in their 80s, and if they made 90, their 90s, if it's a married couple and one survives into 90, or if you're single and you live into 90, you're planning on using that money and you start taking more money out sooner, you jeopardize your future financial security.
Yeah, and that's the problem. To your point, it has to be planned for, it has to be accounted for. This is why it's part of the retirement blueprints that you build for folks right up there with income. We say on the show a lot of times it's not so much about your lump sum, it's about your income in retirement. And that's what every retirement blueprint starts with. But then right after that is inflation. It has to be accounted for. I know we were starting off in the last segment talking about Social Security. And, the nice thing with Social Security is that there typically is a cost of living adjustment to it, but it's not always guaranteed. But there's some statistics about how much it's actually gone up over the past almost 20 years. Do you want to share that?
Yeah, the Senior Citizens League did a study of Social Security, which, by the way, is 41% of the average American's income in retirement. So it's a big chunk. It's not half
Yeah.
of it, but for some of you, it's going to be half of it. For some of you, it may be more than half of it. And so from January of 2000 to January of 2020, this study showed that Social Security benefits went up 53%. Now, keep that figure in mind. The Senior
Hmm.
Citizens League estimated that the cost of the goods, the services, the purchases of retirees during that same 20-year period increased 99.3% during the same period. So you got a
Wow.
53% raise in Social Security. Whippy. I said earlier, it usually doesn't keep up with real inflation. The
Hmm.
53% raise over 20 years sounds good, but when you have a 99.3% increase in your cost of the things that you're buying, you have some issues there. So here's the bottom line. While it does adjust every single year, and we're thankful for that, it doesn't fully cover the difference that most retirees are going to see out of their out of pocket. And let me give you this year, for instance. This year of 2024, the calculation by Social Security was that prices went up 2.5%. So everybody's getting, for 2025, a 2.5% raise. Guess what? Go to the grocery store, go to the gas pump, go buy something, and you'll find out that this year prices are up far more than a mere 2.5%. They're much higher
Hmm.
than that, but yet Social Security is only going to go up 2.5%.
Yeah. So definitely not keeping up with the pace of inflation. So, Tom, strategies with Social Security. You mentioned earlier in the show, of course, one of the strategies is to delay taking it if it's possible, because you do get more money the more you delay. So, versus taking it right at 62 when you become eligible, if you delay until age 70, that means you're going to get so much more than you would have otherwise. What are some other strategies for folks when it comes to really being able to optimize their Social Security and inflation proof it?
Well, I'm going to touch on those right now, but I'll guarantee you some of you need to go to our website, mosleywealthmanagement.com. That's Mosley wealthmanagement.com. And you need to see our schedule, because we have scheduled 5, 6, 7, maybe sometimes 8 Social Security workshops spread all over Southern California every single month, where I'm going to touch on strategies right now, but we dive in head first and stay there for a while during that 1 hour session, where we can help you get more out of your Social Security. It's worth the hour. It might make a difference in thousands of dollars for you in picking the right strategy for you. Don't listen to Bob at the water cooler or Sally in the break room, because they're telling you exact correct strategies for themselves. But the exact correct strategy for you is usually entirely different than it is for anybody else's. You need to have a professional look at yours and say, based on all of the other factors involved, this is where you need to land to get the most out of your Social Security. Now, once you've milked it, and you get the most out of your Social Security, then you need to say, okay, if Social Security is going to do that, here's another curveball. If Social Security does, in fact, in 9 years go down 20 to 25% in what they're able to pay out, the question is not, is it going to happen or not? The question is, what am I going to do about it? Am I going to, if Social Security doesn't stay up with inflation, or if Social Security goes down 20 to 25% in 9 years, do I need to get a part-time job? Do I need to start saving money now? Do I need to invest in dividend yielding investments, that maybe some stock that pays a dividend that will bring more money in? Are there things I need to do to adjust my budget? Are there things that I'm paying for right now, but I really don't need those things right now? And, I have a friend who calls that dropping nickels or dripping nickels. If it was a $5 bill, you'd stop and pick it up. But sometimes if it's a penny, you leave it on the ground. Well, be careful. Those little pennies make dollars, my mom used to say, and the little things in your budget begin to drain you. So you can delay Social Security, as you brought up. You can use some alternative streams of income like dividend yielding stock. You may want to get a part-time job. Not everybody who gets a part-time job is destitute. One client came in one time recently, Kristin, and said, I'm getting a part-time job. I said, really? Why are you doing that? And he said, to save my marriage. And
Right? Because his wife was like, you're driving me crazy. Get out of the house, right?
it's a serious thing. It's one thing to see each other for a couple of hours at night and on the weekend, but when you're looking at somebody 24/7, sometimes you just get to a point where you need some separation. So in fact, this guy was back in my office for a review this week, is the reason I always think about him when he said, I got the part-time job 6 years ago to save my marriage. But there are all kinds of things you can do. And in the meantime, while you're saving your marriage, you can also help offset the impact that inflation is going to have on Social Security.
Yes. So all these things can help reduce your immediate reliance on Social Security and help account for this inflation that, is going to impact that type of income for sure. Well, next up on the list, fixed income sources. And this include things like pensions and annuities. So talk about how inflation can specifically affect this type of income.
Well, it impacts almost every pension, and it makes a huge impact on some private pensions. Now, here's what I mean. Let's talk about pensions first, and then we'll talk about annuities. But if you've got a pension, it likely is flat. Okay, that means that if you get $4,000 at 65, you're going to be getting $4,000 at 70, $4,000 a month at 75, $4,000 a month at 80. And go back and listen or review in your mind what we've talked about, the impact of inflation. It's not going to buy as much. And so therefore, you're going to have that same kind of plan, in that your pension's not going up, but the buying power of that pension is going down at about 3%, maybe 4%, or like in 2022, 8.7 to 10%. It's going to go down in 1 year. So what are you going to do about that? Now, if you've got a government pension, you've got a cost of living, that COLA, cost of living adjustment of 2% max. So, that's great, but if inflation is at 3%, it's a 2% max on the adjustment. All of these are things that we sit down with you and see what your situation is. And we look at your situation, and as you said earlier, Kristin, we start with a blank piece of paper, and we build a retirement blueprint for you that considers all of these things: Social Security, inflation, pension, those things. But you've got to call to get on our schedule to get one of those.
And that number to call is 888-930-5609. Or you're also welcome to visit us online at mosleywealthmanagement.com. That's MOSLEY wealthmanagement.com. Stay with us. We've got more strategies to help you inflation-proof your retirement right after this.
For your own no-cost retirement blueprint, call Tom Mosley of Mosley Wealth Management, 888-930-5609. That's 888-930-5609. Is having $1 million enough to retire? Many have considered this to be the goal amount to have for retirement savings, but that's the $1 million question. Is that enough for today's modern retiree? Are you sure you've saved enough for a 25 or 30-year retirement? Are you concerned about covering large expenses, including taxes and long-term care? If so, you're not alone, but there is a solution. With a comprehensive financial plan, you can take control of your finances to help you achieve your long-term goals. At Mosley Wealth Management, let us help you work towards peace of mind by implementing a complete retirement strategy. Call Tom Mosley and the team of Mosley Wealth Management right away to receive your complimentary, comprehensive written financial plan. 888-930-5609. That's 888-930-5609.
Welcome back, Southern California. You're listening to Right on the Money with Tom Mosley. He is the founder and president of Mosley Wealth Management, and I'm your host, Kristin Oakley. We are having a very important conversation this weekend all about inflation-proofing your retirement, sharing how inflation affects different types of retirement income, and then providing strategies to help keep your money working hard for you. Before the last break, Tom, we started talking about fixed income sources, and of course, we talked about pensions, which typically that's a flat rate. That income doesn't go up. And a lot of folks, I know you work with a lot of folks throughout Southern California who are blessed to still have pensions, but we know that pensions have really become a thing of the past for the majority of Americans. But you mentioned folks setting up a private pension. And that brings us to a very important word and a type of retirement income that a lot of folks have, which is
An annuity.
yes.
And a lot of you right now, you just, you know how they do those graphs on TV where when you say something on TV and the graph turns down because
Right.
it's negative.
Yeah.
I can hear the graph going down because it's negative. But if you're sitting out there with a pension and you're sitting out there with a Social Security, you already have two annuities. You already have a vehicle that's going to pay you something as long as you're alive. Every month that you're alive, it's going to pay you something. And as you said, Kristin, over half the people used to be covered by pensions, either by themselves or a spouse, 50, 60 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Now only 1 out of 6 people that are in their adult retirement years are covered by a pension. So what do? You turn to an annuity. An annuity is a private pension. You put the money into that and it pays you out a payment for as long as you live. Now, here's what nobody gives an annuity credit for. It will pay you or your heirs all of your money plus all of your interest out. Even if you pass away, it will go to your heirs.
Mm-hmm.
If you live too long, so to speak, like life insurance is a payment that pays if you don't live long enough to pay off your bills, pay off your mortgage, pay those kinds of things down. An annuity is a payment that will last if you live too long, because you will, with that annuity, eventually reach a point where you've received all of the money you put in plus the interest. But the annuity is insurance. That's the reason it's only sold by an insurance company and backed up by an insurance company, just like pensions are, by the way, backed up by insurance companies. And it will pay you, and if you're married, your spouse, as long as you are alive, it will pay you a monthly payout. And that is so crucial that you have that. And sometimes people use the annuity because they say, look, this is how much money we need.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we have as a gap after we take our Social Security, our rentals, our pensions. We still need another $1,000 per month now. So we put into place an annuity. Well, that's good to start with, but over a period of time, that annuity paying out $1,000 suffers the same problem that a pension that doesn't go up, that doesn't have a cost of living adjustment, or Social Security that doesn't have a proper cost of living adjustment. It suffers the same problem. So what we do many times is we ladder in annuities where one turns on now, one turns on later. Recently, a couple of weeks ago, I had a client that came in. He was 72. 72. He is 72. His wife is 64. Not unusual for there to be a split. His wife has
Mm-hmm.
the lower Social Security. Now, let me show you how an annuity worked for them. He wanted to say, what happens if something happens to me,
Mm-hmm.
which it likely will, if you're given the fact that women live a longer period of time in most cases than men do. He's already 8 years older than she is. She may have 15 years to live after he's gone. What
Right.
he wanted to know, how can we replace her Social Security if something happens to me, because she's going to bump up and take my breadwinner's Social Security because mine's higher, and she's going to have, though her Social Security is going to go away. What can we build into our plan, Tom, so that she doesn't lose that Social Security income whenever I pass away if I go first? Well, bingo.
Mm-hmm.
We put together an annuity. We guesstimated, okay, what do you think you have? Well, at least 10 years, hopefully more. But if I go 10 years, fine. I want to make sure she's covered. So we put into an income annuity into place so that once he passes away, if he goes first, then that income annuity makes up the difference for the Social Security.
Mm.
You can also ladder additional annuities. In fact, there's one annuity that an A+ rated carrier has out there right now that you put X amount of dollars in there. And one of the bells and whistles, I call it, one of the features and benefits is that you can turn on additional income. You can turn on part of the income from part of the amount, and you can add to it and add to it. You can add to it 10 times,
Mm-hmm.
and you can grow that income over the year and structure that annuity over the years so that you turn on more and more and more income flow. So there's what you can do about it. If the pension, if it's locked and flat, we can't do anything about it. But that private pension of a fixed indexed annuity, we can set those up so that they're laddered, so that more than one of them turns on, or enough goes into one of those that you can turn on an additional amount and then another additional amount, and 3 years later another additional amount, or 1 year later some more amount, until you get all of the annuity turned on and you can actually increase your income over a period of time. So there's all kind of ways to do it. You say, well, I've never heard of that. You know, chances are, if I followed you on the job one day, there's probably 10 things you would do within the first hour that I've never heard of,
Right.
because I've never been a plumber. I've never been an accountant. I've never, you name it. I mean, you can go down the list of things I've never done. But what I have done is, for 30 years, I've been a professional helping people make sure they don't run out of income the rest of their lives. And the nice thing about it is, I've always been a teacher. I've always been a trainer. I used to be a pastor. I've always been a coach. I have coached 10 all-star advisors to do the same exact thing I do, to make sure that people never run out of sufficient income the rest of their life. And that's exactly, Kristin, what we're talking about.
Yes.
And if there's anybody out there and you're saying, I don't know how to do that, I don't know how to structure that, I've never heard of some of these things. Well, don't be ignorant. What you don't know can hurt you. What you don't know can make you go broke
Yes.
in retirement. We are here to help you not go broke in retirement. You need to call in. You need to set up an appointment with one of our 10 all-star advisors. Now, we go to great expense. Trust me, I pay it every month. We have an office in Encino, an office in Arcadia, an office in Ontario, an office in Scripps Ranch that we're multiplying by 4 the size of that office even as we speak. And by the first of the year, we're going to quadruple our size down in San Diego. And our main office is in Anaheim, where most of our 17 employees are housed. But we will meet you in one of those offices, and we will look at your particular situation. Do you have Social Security needs? Do you have a pension that you need to pick the right choice in the way it pays out? Do you need a private pension called a fixed indexed annuity? Does it need to increase for inflation through the years? Probably, if you're going to live very long. Are you older than your spouse, and you need to make sure and take care of your spouse once you're gone? There are not just annuities, but other things we put into place. See, we're the professional in this area, and this is where we can sit down to help you. And guess what we charge? We charge nothing. It's absolutely free, complimentary. You come in, we sit down, we build a plan for you.
And I know there are folks that are listening to this right now, Tom, and this might be new information to them, and they're going, really? For free? What's the catch? What do you say to folks when they have a hard time believing that you are willing to sit down and build these plans for folks completely complimentary?
Well, we'll help anybody. Our whole mission statement is this. I started by saying, we want to help people never run out of income the rest of their life. And then I realized it needed to be sufficient income, so we added that word. And then I realized a few years later that taxes were the biggest thing taking money out of people's pocket. And a whole nother huge part of what we do is make sure you pay as little as you're legally required to pay in taxes, not the penitentiary plan, but we make sure that you're legally avoiding every tax you can legally avoid. And we train with Ed Slott and we train with others to make sure we're doing the right thing for you from a tax perspective. And then over a period of years, and it's been almost 30, on June the 8th of next year, it'll be 30 years I've been doing this. I just realized that I want to work with people who are pleasant to get along with. And not everybody's pleasant to get along with. There's some people, as my dad used to jokingly say, that they were weaned on a dill pickle, and they just had a sour attitude and approach to life. And so what we do is we put it all together in our mission statement. We work with people who are pleasant to get along with to make sure that you never run out of sufficient income the rest of your life, and you pay as little as you're legally required to pay in taxes. And that's our mission statement. That's what all of our purposes. When we build a retirement blueprint, that's the foundation of it. That's where we come to the core. So back to your question. Why do we do it for free? Because when you walk in, we don't know if you fit that criteria.
Right.
Number one, we don't know if you've saved enough. Number two, we don't know if you're making the right kind of financial decisions that you're going to have a real chance to have a great retirement. We don't want to captain the USS Titanic, if you understand, and if you're making wrong or incorrect decisions. And we want to make sure that there's money there, that we can build a plan that you can be happy with and you can live with, and you'll never run out of income, and you pay as little as you're legally required to pay in taxes with a smile on your face because you're a happy person. That's what we're looking for. So we don't want everybody, Kristin.
Right.
Just like you're trying to decide if you want us, we're trying to decide if we want to work with you.
Yes. And you do it completely complimentary because you know as well it's the right thing to do. As a fiduciary, you have that legal and ethical obligation to always serve the client's best interests. It starts with having a plan. And it's amazing how much of our industry doesn't focus on all these other elements. They only talk to you about your investments. But at Mosley Wealth Management, you're going to be able to get that comprehensive, holistic financial plan, customized, personalized for you. It's going to cover everything from your income to inflation to Social Security timing and planning to tax planning and strategies, as well as legacy and healthcare. It's going to be all wrapped up together, specifically created for you. So again, that number to call to claim your complimentary retirement blueprint is 888-930-5609. We'll be back with more right after this.
Which will you spend more money on in retirement, food or healthcare? Do you take your investments out of the stock market now that you are retired? How do you know if you've saved enough to stay retired? Will your Social Security check be reduced in the future? How do you produce income from your nest egg to fight costs like taxes and inflation? At Mosley Wealth Management, Tom Mosley and the team take the guessing out of retirement planning by devising a written plan that accounts for all of your concerns. The bigger question, are you going to be okay in retirement? Find out the answers to your retirement questions by calling Tom Mosley of Mosley Wealth Management, 888-930-5609. Income, investments, Social Security, Medicare, longevity, health care. We cover these solutions and all of those other questions on your mind to answer, are you going to be okay in retirement? Call Tom Mosley and Mosley Wealth Management for your own complimentary retirement review, 888-930-5609.
Welcome back, Southern California. You're listening to Right on the Money with Tom Mosley, founder and president of Mosley Wealth Management, and I'm your host, Kristin Oakley. Today, we have been talking about how to inflation-proof your retirement. We've been talking about how different types of retirement income have different vulnerabilities when it comes to inflation. Next up on our list, and we're going to talk about how to safeguard these next 4 types of income from inflation, we have your retirement investment portfolio. Now, this is interesting, Tom, because I think, again, we mentioned earlier, so much of our industry is focused on the investment piece, but that's in the accumulation years. And there's not a lot of education about what to do with it once you've retired. And you and I both know the strategy needs to change, right?
Yeah, it really does. I mean, here's what happens, and think about what's happened in the last few years. I mean, back to 2022, when inflation went to 8.7 acknowledged in our Social Security bump, but most people think it was 9, 10, or 11% in 2022. A lot of people pulled their money out of the stock market in fear, and they put their money back into CDs. Well, what were CDs paying? Well, Tom, I can get over 5% in a CD. And I almost want to say, congratulations, go down to the bank and get 5% in a CD where inflation is 9, 10, or 11%, and
Mm-hmm.
you're only losing half to
Right.
inflation.
Yeah.
So you're still losing, you're still losing purchasing power. And the
You're going
problem is,
broke safely, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, that is a great way to put it because you get too conservative. Now think about it. Let me just ask you a question. We are at inflation that no matter how you look at it is up 25, 27, 33%, however you want to look at whatever numbers, depending on whose office is which red or blue that you're in, you're trying to look at numbers.
Mm-hmm.
You can calculate your inflation. But watch, if you'd left your money in the stock market, yes, inflation hit in 2022 and the markets went down 22%, but all 3 of the big stock market indices are at all-time highs. That means if you'd have just had your money in the S&P 500 or in the Dow Jones 30 industrial averages or in the NASDAQ, if you'd just had your money in those, they would be at all-time highs right now. Because
Right.
why? The stock market is valued in dollars. And if dollars get inflated, having money in the market is a very good place to be. And I want to tell all of you something that are listening to me, that in a scary time for inflation, the stock market is a good place to be because yes, it may be impacted negatively by the news and by what hits and what comes out and the fear that runs rampant for a while. But overall, the stock market is going to respond positively during a period of inflation because it's going to inflate too.
Right.
All of the prices of the things that all of the companies are selling are going to go up, and profits are going to look good, and everything is going to look good in a stock market in most cases. There's no promises here.
Sure.
You understand what I'm saying? But in most cases, if you pull your money out in fear and you put it in the bank, that's good. You're going broke safely, as you said. I love it. I love the phrase. So be careful. Most of you don't have the luxury of having such an awesome amount of assets that you're able just to put it in the bank and forget it, because you got to stay up with inflation, and taking that portfolio out of the market is usually not a good thing to do during an inflationary time.
Right. It's time in the market that makes the difference, not trying to time the market, right? That's the key difference. And, we've talked before too, how money is not red or blue, it's green. The stats show if people had only been invested when their political party was in office and then taken their money out the rest of the time, how much less they would have earned over many, many years versus just keeping it invested the entire time. So important to note with that the stock market also responds to inflation, right?
Well, look back to the election. Okay, remember a long time ago when we had an election last month or this
Right.
month, okay? Well, we thought the election was going to last for several months, but it ended up only lasting a day or two, and then we found out who was going to win. But there were so many people who were coming in for reviews and saying, I'm afraid of the market with the election. I'm afraid I should take my money out of the market. Well, if you'd taken your money out of the market and that Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of the week after the election, the market overall went up about 6%.
Mm-hmm.
You would have missed a 6% bump in the market by being fearful,
Yep.
by being afraid, by taking it out. So you've just got to be really careful about taking the money out of the market and into the market, because if it's out there in the news, it's already baked into the price of the market.
Yep.
It's the black swans that come along. You never expect to see the black swan on the lake. It's the black swans that come along that throw the market into a downward spin, like people flying planes into buildings
Mm-hmm.
and different things like that. That's what causes the market to go down unexpectedly, and you can't plan on those.
Right.
So just staying, as you see, 𝗬𝗏𝗁 is a friend of ours. He's a 13 times New York Times bestseller, wrote The Automatic Millionaire and a bunch of other books like that. But he always says it's time in the market, not timing the market, that makes the difference.
Yes, for sure. Well, I want to ask you now about passive income sources. So things like interest, dividends, rental income. How does one inflation proof their retirement with that type of income source?
Well, in some ways, it's a lot like being in retirement, and your retirement trip left Southern California, and you find yourself in Texas. Passive income, dividends, and rental income. You should have planned to go to Washington State. You should have gone in an entirely different direction.
Mm,
But for those of you, I mean, let's be practical. You can't just all of a sudden decide to get interest earning investments or dividends. You can buy some dividend stock, like we said earlier, but the rental income, that's something you've got to plan on over a period of time. You don't just go out and bingo have that. And usually the good thing of it is rental income stays up with inflation, but that's something that you need to start structuring into your retirement plan. And so many people, I guess what I'm trying to fight here, Kristen, is so many people get to retirement, they get their 401k or their IRA, and they say, well, I want to go buy some rental property.
hmm
Well, first of all, there's some very strict things that are built into where you can't use IRA money or qualified money or 401k money to buy rental property, because if you're going to upkeep it yourself, if you're going to improve it, if you're going to do things, then the IRS is getting real sticky about what they allow and what they don't allow. So rental income is good. I have rental income. Dividends are good. Interest rates are good, but that's something that if you're going to have those, you need to start building those and determine it, because it's like going in a Texas direction or a Washington State direction. You've got to go in different directions. And yes, you can double back and catch back up, but it's better if you start in your 40s or your 45 or 50 to begin to build that direction, rather than get into retirement and all of a sudden decide, well, I wish I was in Washington State, and you find yourself in West Texas.
Right. Yep. Important to plan for all these things. And I know we've got two more of these income sources on the list here. We've already talked a little bit about the erosion of cash and savings and how cash can feel safe. But again, are you going broke safely? That's the problem with just keeping all your money in cash or in savings.
My own father had $92,000 in a safety deposit box in a bank in Watauga, Texas, in the Bank of America on Roof Snow Drive when he passed away. $92,000. And I've told him so many times, Dad, why don't you at least put that in a CD or a money market where you can make something? And he said, well, son, as long as I've got it there, it's safe and I'm not losing a thing.
Mm,
And it's hard to say, no, Dad, you are losing, because he was losing purchasing power.
yep.
And inflation, the biggest thing is you can have the same amount of dollars, but if you've got $1 million at 3% inflation, listen to this number, $1 million at 3% inflation in 20 years, if you bury it in the backyard, they put it in foil into the refrigerator, into the freezer. I've seen it in different places, okay, where people have pulled it out. They put it in the wall of their house in a secret compartment. $1 million dug up 20 years later at 3% inflation will only buy $550,000 worth of goods. So you've got to really be careful about saying, I'm not losing money because I've got it all in cash in the bedroom.
Right.
You got to be really careful.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and then finally, taxes and inflation. And taxes can further erode one's retirement income. This is why you are so passionate about engaging in strategic tax planning for your clients. But yeah, this is another problem because you combine taxes and inflation. That's what really can sabotage someone's success in retirement.
Yeah, I know. Even when they do accounting, those are two of the factors that always come into effect when they evaluate any kind of business or any kind of things. They always consider taxes and inflation because taxes are another drain. It's the beauty of a Roth. Are you in a Roth? Do you have an opportunity to be in a Roth in your 401k? They're adding Roths to 401ks. They're being forced to add Roths to 401ks over the next few years because that's a way to pay the tax on it now and never pay the tax on it again. You say, well, I've never heard of that. Well, what kind of advice are you getting? Are you looking at somebody who's looking at not just investing your money and making money so that they keep your money and they can make money off of your money? We said earlier in the show, we work with people who are pleasant to get along with to make sure they never run out of sufficient income the rest of their life and they pay as little as they're legally required to pay in taxes. Most investment advisors never consider taxes. They leave it up to the CPA, and the CPA is only thinking about what you have to pay for last year. Watch what they'll ask you this coming February. Get your stuff in. And in March, they'll call you and say, I got your stuff ready. And all of it is looking behind. Look forward, get a plan, get a blueprint that addresses income, inflation, investments, taxes, healthcare, and legacy. And we offer that to you for free.
And as part of that plan, of course, it's going to wrap up everything we've talked about today and help you inflation proof your retirement. So that number to call is 888-930-5609 to claim your complimentary retirement blueprint, or you're also welcome to visit us online at mosleywealthmanagement.com. That's MOSLEY wealthmanagement.com. Hey, thanks so much for joining us this weekend. We appreciate you being here. Be safe, be happy, be blessed. And we look forward to being back with you next week here on Right on the Money with Tom Mosley.
Call 888-930-5609 for your no-cost appointment. 888-930-5609. Investment advisory services offered by duly registered individuals through Mosley Wealth Management Incorporated. Mosley Wealth Management and Mosley Insurance and Financial Services are affiliated companies by common ownership license number OB61811. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refers to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength, claims-paying ability of the issuing carrier. This content is intended for informational and educational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the needs of an individual situation. All hypothetical examples are provided for illustrative purposes only. They do not represent real-life scenarios. Mosley Insurance and Financial Services, nor its agents or representatives, may give tax or legal advice. Individuals should consult with a qualified professional for guidance before making any investment decisions. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. Some of the information provided may be from one or more third parties, which we believe to be reliable sources, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Mosley Insurance and Financial Services.